It all started as a typical morning, right? You know, the kind where you're running around, getting the kids ready for school, trying not to spill your coffee, and praying you don't have to make small talk with the other parents about how your day is going. But this was the day everything changed. My name is Greg, and for the past 7 years, I thought I had everything figured out. A beautiful wife named Emily, 2 kids, Jack, who's 8 and thinks he's a budding engineer thanks to Lego sets, and Lily, our 6-year-old who's convinced she's a princess destined to rule the world. We were the family you'd look at and think, wow, they have it all. But, as it often goes in life, appearances can be deceiving. The setting for my unplanned downfall? The annual zoo field trip. If you've never chaperoned a group of kids, let me tell you, it's like herding cats, but with more sunscreen and a higher chance of accidentally stepping on a lunchbox. Emily had volunteered to help, and of course, I joined in, thinking it would be a fun day out. At least, that was the plan before I discovered the truth. I was assigned to keep an eye on a group of kids while Emily was off in another section with the other parent volunteers. Honestly, I didn't think much of it. Emily was always busy, you know. Work, the kids, dinner, laundry, you get it. It was nothing new. I wasn't one of those guys who pored over the details of my wife's every move. But today, something was off. We had stopped for a quick snack break near the giraffes, and by snack, I mean a snack that cost me an absurd $12 for a bag of pretzels. I was standing near the food stand, chatting with another dad about the wonders of coffee when my eye caught something that made my stomach churn. Emily was sitting at a nearby bench with another chaperone, a guy named Jake. I knew Jake, of course. He was friendly, a bit too friendly at times, but I always just assumed he was one of those too nice types. But as I looked closer, I saw Emily lean in and laugh at something Jake had said. Now, don't get me wrong. I know a wife and a male friend can laugh together. But it was the way she looked at him, the way she touched his arm casually. It wasn't just friendly. It was intimate. A spark of suspicion flickered in my gut, but I shook it off. There's no way, I thought. I must be overreacting. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. I decided to do what any slightly paranoid husband would do. I went over to Jack and Lily, making sure they were occupied with their snacks, and then casually strolled past Emily and Jake. It was a slow-motion moment, like a bad horror movie where you know something terrible is about to happen, but you're too invested to stop it. As I walked by, I heard Emily whisper something to Jake. I thought we agreed no one would find out today, she said, her voice too soft for anyone else to hear but me. I froze in my tracks. No one would find out today? What did that mean? I don't know what possessed me, but I made the rash decision to stick around and wait. I stood there for a few moments, acting like I was absorbed in the exhibit with a couple of kids who were asking me too many questions about animal poop. But all I could hear in my head were those words. No one would find out today. As I waited, I noticed Jake's hand resting on the back of Emily's chair. It was subtle, but it wasn't the kind of touch you'd expect from someone just volunteering at a field trip. Then, just as I was about to break away and confront her, I noticed something, a glint in the sun. Emily's phone was lying on the bench next to her purse, screen facing up. And that's when I saw it. A text message from Jake. Can't wait for tonight. Same time. My heart dropped. Same time. For what? My mind raced through 100 possibilities. The last thing I wanted to do was be the overdramatic husband, but in that moment, I couldn't help myself. I picked up her phone as subtly as I could, pretending to check on the kids while swiping the screen. The text was innocent enough on its own, but I knew. This was the kind of message that spoke volumes. I slid her phone back into her purse, my hands shaking as I watched Emily get up to take the kids to see the monkeys. I followed at a distance, trying to hold it together. I couldn't just accuse her of something without proof, but the feeling gnawing at my insides told me I didn't need any more confirmation. So, what do you do when you've uncovered a betrayal like that? Well, I had 2 choices. 1, I could march right up to her and confront her in front of the zoo, which would make for a spectacularly awkward moment in front of 100 kids and parents. Or 2, I could bide my time and think it through. I wasn't a reactive guy. I was a thinker. But right now, my mind was a storm of thoughts I could barely make sense of. I took a deep breath, looked over at Jack and Lily, and decided to do what I always did in tough situations, pretend everything was fine. For now, the rest of the zoo field trip passed in a blur. I pretended everything was fine, but my mind was a million miles away, running through scenarios that I never thought I'd have to deal with. My heart was racing with every step I took, as I kept a tight grip on the kids, ensuring they didn't get too close to the enclosures or try to sneak off. All I could think about was Emily and Jake, and the text I had seen. It was a reminder that sometimes things don't feel wrong until they do, and once that little voice in your head whispers that something's off, you can't ignore it. It's like a ticking time bomb, one that's easy to ignore at first, but impossible to silence once it starts. I kept telling myself that maybe I was overreacting, maybe it was nothing, but deep down, I knew better. I couldn't shake the image of their closeness. The way she had looked at him earlier, it wasn't just friendly. As the kids and I gathered our things to leave, I found myself stuck in a mix of emotions, anger, confusion, disbelief. I should have confronted her right there, in front of the giraffes. I should have asked her point blank, demanded answers in front of everyone, but I didn't. I couldn't. I wasn't sure if I was more afraid of the confrontation itself or what I might discover if I did. I thought about what would happen if I confronted her now. Would she deny it? Would she lie? Would she beg for forgiveness? Or would she just coldly admit the truth, as if she had been expecting it all along? The possibilities ran through my head as I helped Jack and Lily into the car. They were chattering away about their favorite animals, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. We drove home in a silence that felt heavier than the world had ever been. I kept my focus on the road, trying to block out the growing sense of dread that was building inside me. The kids were still excited about the trip, but I could barely hear them anymore. The thoughts about Emily's secret affair were consuming me. When we finally arrived home, I told the kids to go inside, and then I sat in the car for a while, staring at the front door, weighing my options. I knew I couldn't let this go. I needed to know what was really going on, and I needed to know now. It was one of those moments in life where you realize you can't go back, no matter how much you wish you could. As I walked into the house, Emily was in the kitchen, making dinner. She looked up and smiled as I entered, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. Too normal. It was almost as if nothing had changed, but I knew better. The text from Jake, the way she had looked at him, it was all too much to ignore. I stood there, watching her as she chopped vegetables, pretending everything was fine. She didn't seem to notice anything different in me, which made the whole situation feel even more surreal. How could she be so calm? Didn't she know that everything had shifted, that I knew? The thought of confronting her then and there, of ripping the veil of normalcy away, made my stomach turn. But the truth had to come out, one way or another. I decided to wait for the right moment. The kids were in the other room, watching TV, and the house was still. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming. I wasn't a man who liked confrontation, but this felt different. This wasn't just a disagreement about a forgotten anniversary or a missed family gathering. This was a betrayal, a crack in the foundation of everything I thought I knew about my life. I couldn't just pretend anymore. I waited until Emily stepped into the living room, asking if I wanted to sit down and relax with her for a bit. She didn't seem to notice anything was off, but I could see it in her eyes. There was a distance there, something I hadn't seen before. I didn't take her up on the offer to relax, though. Instead, I asked her to sit down. Her face immediately went pale, and I could see the gears turning in her head. She knew something was coming. I wasn't sure what I expected from her, but I didn't expect the calm that settled over her face. She had prepared herself for this moment, as if she had known it would eventually come. "Emily, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She sat down across from me, folding her hands in her lap. She didn't speak at first, just waited for me to continue. "I saw the text," I said, each word heavier than the last. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. I didn't need to say anything more. The look in her eyes told me everything. She wasn't surprised, she wasn't ashamed. She was ready, as if she had been waiting for this moment to unfold. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine, but she didn't deny it. "Greg," she started, her voice soft, but it was the kind of softness that only made it worse. I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened." "It just happened?" I asked, incredulous. "You think this is something that just happened?" I could feel the anger boiling up inside me, but I held it back. I wasn't going to let this turn into a shouting match. "Not yet. I never meant for you to find out like this," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Jake and I." "Jake?" I interrupted, the name bitter in my mouth. I should have known. I should have known it was him. The realization hit me like a freight train. He'd always been around. Friendly, helpful Jake. Of course, it was him. How could I have been so blind? "I'm sorry," she said quietly, the words feeling hollow. I didn't want to lose you, but I was already lost. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to make sense of everything. You didn't want to lose me? I repeated, my voice rising. You were already lost? And what about me, Emily? What about everything we built? Our kids, our family, our lives? Do they mean nothing to you? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes. I could see the guilt on her face, but it didn't bring me any comfort. I don't know what to say, she whispered. And in that moment, I realized I didn't either. What could I say? How could I put into words the mess that my life had become? How could I process the fact that the woman I had loved for so long, the woman I thought I knew, was someone else entirely? The silence that followed felt unbearable. I need some time, I finally said, my voice quieter now. I need to figure out what to do next. And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there, waiting for me to say more. But I had nothing left to give. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. Every time I closed my eyes, all I saw was Emily and Jake, their laughter echoing in my mind. It felt like I was living in someone else's nightmare, but I couldn't wake up. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a prison. I tried to keep it together for the kids. Jack and Lily had no idea what was going on, and I wasn't ready to shatter their world just yet. But the weight of what I'd learned, the overwhelming sense of betrayal, kept pressing down on me. I couldn't escape it, no matter how hard I tried. Every moment I spent in that house felt like a reminder of everything I had lost, everything that was slipping through my fingers. Emily and I barely spoke. She spent most of her time in the bedroom, and I stayed in the living room, trying to focus on work, trying to avoid looking at her or hearing her voice. We were existing in the same space, but were as distant as two strangers. It wasn't until that Saturday afternoon that everything truly came to a head. I had spent the morning trying to ignore the ever-growing tension between us, but it was impossible to avoid any longer. Emily had been distant, almost as if she were trying to give me space, or maybe she was just avoiding the inevitable. Either way, I knew we needed to have a real conversation. I had to hear her side of the story, had to know what was going through her mind. But as usual, she avoided me. It wasn't until the late afternoon when she came into the living room and, in that soft voice I had once loved, asked if we could talk. I looked at her, unsure of what to expect. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers right then and there. Another part of me, the part one hated, wanted to just curl up into a ball and pretend everything was normal. But I couldn't do that. Not anymore. I think we need to figure out what happens next, Emily said, her words hanging in the air like a delicate thread. I could tell she was nervous, but she wasn't showing it. She had this calm exterior, but I knew her well enough to see through it. Beneath that calm was guilt, shame, and fear. She wasn't the woman I had married anymore. She was a stranger sitting in front of me. I couldn't keep pretending things were fine, couldn't keep playing the role of the happy husband when everything had changed. I had spent so much of the last few days avoiding the inevitable confrontation, but now there was no escaping it. She was waiting for me to respond, and I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on us. I stood up, pacing the room. You're right, I said, my voice tight. We do need to figure things out. But the question is, Emily, what are we going to figure out? She looked at me with wide eyes, almost as if she were waiting for me to come to some conclusion for her. But I couldn't make it easy on her. I wasn't about to make this whole situation easier just because she was uncomfortable. I never meant for this to happen, she said, her voice cracking slightly. I didn't want to hurt you, Greg. It got out of control. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to tell you. Her words were hollow. The way she said it, the way she looked at me, it wasn't remorse. It was a feeble attempt to justify what she had done. I wanted to scream at her, to throw it all back in her face and demand that she tell me the truth, all of it. But I didn't. I just stood there, trying to keep my emotions in check. So what now? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Do we just act like nothing happened? Like everything is fine? Like you didn't break my trust? Like you didn't break our family? The words stung as I said them, but they needed to be said. I needed to hear her answer, even if I didn't want to hear it. I don't know, Emily whispered. I don't know what to say, Greg. I love you, I really do, but I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can. The admission hung in the air like a lead weight. I had been prepared for her to deny it, to try to justify her actions, but this was different. She was admitting something I had been afraid of for days. She didn't know if she could fix it. She didn't know if we could fix us. And that hit me harder than anything. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath me, and suddenly I was standing on a cliff, looking down into an abyss I didn't want to fall into. I didn't know how to respond to that, didn't know how to find the words that would make sense of it all. For a long moment, we just sat there, the silence growing heavier between us. Then, just as I thought I was about to break, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer it, but something told me to pick up. I glanced at the caller ID, Jake. I froze. I knew I couldn't ignore it. Not now. I glanced at Emily, who looked almost as if she were bracing for impact. I picked up the phone, my heart pounding. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Greg." Jake's voice came through the line, smooth, almost too smooth. "Listen, I think we need to talk. It's about Emily. It's about everything." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't ready for this. I didn't want to hear from him. But at the same time, I knew I had to. "I know what's going on, Jake," I said, my voice cold. "I know everything. I saw the text, remember?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Jake sighed. "Greg, I didn't want this to happen. I didn't mean for things to go this far. But it's not just about me and Emily anymore. This is bigger than that." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. I was already teetering on the edge of losing it, and Jake's cryptic words weren't helping. "You need to meet me. This can't be fixed over the phone," Jake said, his voice urgent. "It's not just about what's happened between me and Emily. There's something else, something you don't know." My stomach turned. What could be worse than what I already knew? What other secrets had they been hiding? "Where?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "You'll know when you get there," Jake replied, before hanging up. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the phone in my hand, the weight of his words settling over me. What had I gotten myself into? I looked at Emily, who was still sitting across from me, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She knew what was coming next. "Where do we go from here?" I asked her, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, Greg. I really don't know," she replied softly, her gaze dropping to the floor. And for the first time, I felt the enormity of what had been lost between us. I spent the next few hours trying to wrap my head around everything. I barely ate. I couldn't focus. The kids were playing in the other room, but it was like I wasn't even there with them. The thought of Emily and Jake, the strange phone call, the uncertainty, it was all suffocating. I kept replaying Jake's words in my head. "There's something else, something you don't know." What could be worse than everything I already knew? I felt like I was trapped in a bad dream, and no matter how much I wanted to wake up, the reality of what was happening was only getting clearer and more terrifying by the minute. I stared at the front door, wondering when Jake would show up, or if I was meant to meet him somewhere else. His cryptic message left me on edge, as if he were leading me into a trap I wasn't prepared for, and yet, I had to go. It felt like the only way to finally get the answers I needed, even if those answers would tear me apart. I didn't want to face Emily again, not just yet. There were too many emotions swirling inside me: betrayal, anger, confusion, and I couldn't let myself go there again without first understanding the full scope of what I was dealing with. The last thing I wanted to do was react impulsively, but my nerves were getting the better of me. I took a deep breath and decided to leave the house. I needed space to think, to find a way to make sense of all this. The house felt too small, too suffocating. I grabbed my jacket, not even bothering to say goodbye to the kids. They were still happily distracted, and part of me wished I could just leave it all behind and pretend everything was fine for their sake. But I couldn't do that. Not anymore. The drive was almost calming in its own way. The roads were quiet, the sky dimming as evening approached, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. The sound of the engine, the hum of the tires against the asphalt, it was a distraction, a break from the chaos that had been consuming my thoughts. But that calm didn't last long. I was heading toward the address Jake had given me, some rundown cafe on the outskirts of town. The place was nothing special, just a small, dingy building tucked between a few other nondescript businesses. When I pulled into the parking lot, I felt a strange sense of dread wash over me. This was it. This was where the truth would finally come out, for better or worse. I walked inside, the smell of stale coffee and fried food hitting me immediately. The place was empty, save for a few people sitting in the back, their faces obscured by shadows. The dim lighting made everything feel surreal, as if I were stepping into a scene from some noir film. Jake was already sitting at a corner booth, his back to me. He looked different somehow, nervous, maybe, or maybe it was just the weight of the situation. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by an air of uncertainty. As I approached, he turned to face me, giving me a tight, uneasy smile. "Greg," he said, his voice strained. I didn't know how else to do this. "You deserve to know everything." I slid into the booth across from him, my stomach a tight knot. "What do you mean everything, Jake? What more is there to know? Emily's been having an affair with you for months, and I've had enough of this game. What's the secret you're hiding?" Jake's eyes darted around the cafe, as if he were looking for an escape. His hands were shaking slightly as he clasped them together on the table, his posture tense. "It's not just that, Greg. There's more. I wasn't the only one." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. "What do you mean? You weren't the only one?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. My mind was racing, trying to process what he was saying, but it didn't make sense. There couldn't be more. Emily had already broken my trust in the worst way possible. Jake took a deep breath, looking down at his hands for a moment. "It wasn't just me, Greg. She's been seeing someone else, someone much closer than you think. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but you need to know. It's not just an affair. He trailed off, and for the first time, I saw the real guilt in his eyes. He wasn't just talking about his own mistakes. He was talking about something far worse, something that went beyond betrayal. I leaned in, trying to make sense of his words. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Who's the other person?" Jake swallowed hard, looking at me as though he was weighing whether to say more, to reveal the truth that he knew would destroy me. Finally, he spoke, his words cutting through the silence. "It's Mark, your brother." The shock of his words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. My mind went blank. Mark? My brother? The one person I had trusted above all else. The one person who had always been there for me. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to scream, to demand that Jake take it back, but the look in his eyes told me it was true. The weight of his confession hung between us, suffocating me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, and I couldn't get enough air to recover. "Are you serious?" I managed to croak, my voice thick with disbelief. "Mark, my own brother? You're telling me that not only has my wife been cheating on me, but she's been doing it with my own brother?" Jake nodded, his expression heavy with regret. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you, Greg, but you needed to know. I tried to talk to Emily about it, but she wouldn't listen. She thought she could get away with it all, but now it's all falling apart." His words were like a slow, relentless drip of truth, each one cutting deeper. I had thought I had seen the worst of it, that my world had already shattered beyond repair. But this was something else entirely. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to process it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I couldn't find the words, and Jake seemed to be waiting for me to react, to do something. But all I could do was sit there, staring at him in stunned silence. The cafe around us seemed to fade into the background, the muffled voices of the few patrons no longer registering in my mind. I felt like I was drowning in the truth. My brother, my flesh and blood, and Emily, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything. Finally, I stood up. I had to leave. I couldn't stay here, couldn't look at Jake anymore. I couldn't process this information all at once. I had to go home, had to confront Mark, had to figure out what came next. "I need to go," I said, my voice hoarse. Jake didn't try to stop me. He just nodded, his face etched with remorse. "I'm sorry, Greg," he said quietly, but I barely heard him. I left the cafe in a daze, my mind still trying to make sense of the words that had just destroyed my world. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, the weight of everything crashing down on me. As I walked to my car, I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. I had to face Emily, face Mark, face the wreckage of my life. But in that moment, I had no idea how. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white. The road ahead was a blur of headlights and streetlights, but all I could focus on was Jake's words echoing in my head. Mark, my brother, my own flesh and blood. It felt like my brain couldn't process it fully, like I was living in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from, no matter how hard I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. As I pulled into the driveway, the house seemed too quiet, almost like it was holding its breath, waiting for the storm to hit. I sat there for a few moments, not sure if I was ready to face what was about to unfold. But I couldn't delay it any longer. I couldn't run away. I walked inside, the door creaking slightly as I pushed it open. The house was still as if nothing had changed, but everything had. I could hear the kids in the other room, laughing, oblivious to the storm brewing in their parents' lives. I hated this. I hated that my kids had to be a part of this nightmare, but I knew I couldn't protect them from the truth forever. Emily was sitting on the couch, her eyes red as if she had been crying, though I hadn't seen any tears from her earlier. She looked up as I entered, her face immediately clouding with worry. But there was something else there too, something I hadn't seen in her before, guilt. And as much as I wanted to ignore it, to pretend I could just forget about everything and let her off the hook, I couldn't. Not anymore. I spoke to Jake, I said, my voice so cold it surprised even me. I had no idea how I sounded, but it was the only way I could keep from losing control. Her eyes widened, and she immediately stood up, her face pale. Greg, I didn't want you to find out like this. Please, we need to talk. I shook my head. Talk? We've been talking for weeks, Emily. You didn't want me to find out like this? You didn't think I'd ever figure it out? She took a hesitant step toward me, and I almost couldn't stand the way she moved, like she was afraid of me now, afraid of what was coming. Maybe she should be. I never wanted it to happen, Greg. I swear to you. But it did. And I'm sorry. I never meant for this to destroy everything we had. Her voice broke slightly on the last part, and I could hear the cracks in the mask she had been wearing, but it didn't soften the blow. It didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me in the worst way. Emily, I said, my voice shaking with the effort to stay calm, this isn't about us anymore. It's about me finding out that my own brother, my flesh and blood, has been part of this mess. And you've been lying to me, to my face, while all of this was happening. How could you do that? The words came out sharp, like daggers, each one cutting deeper than I wanted them to. But I couldn't stop myself. I had spent so many days walking around in a fog of confusion, trying to pretend that things were still normal, but I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend I didn't know. I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She looked at me, her face a mix of regret and fear. I didn't know how to stop, Greg. I was lost, and I thought I could fix it. I thought I could keep everything together. I was wrong. I know that now, but I can't take it back. I stared at her, searching her face for something, anything, that would make sense of it all. But I found nothing. I felt numb. I was numb, and that scared me more than anything else. My emotions were so overwhelming that I couldn't tell if I was angry, heartbroken, or just plain exhausted. The silence between us was thick, almost suffocating. What happened with Mark? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't believe I was even asking. Couldn't believe I was still trying to make sense of a situation that didn't make sense. But I needed to hear it from her. I needed to hear her admit the depth of this betrayal. I never wanted it to go this far with Mark, she said, her voice barely audible now. It started as just something comforting. I didn't know how to stop it, how to fix the distance between us. I was so lost, Greg. Her words were hollow, empty. They didn't carry the weight of someone truly remorseful, but rather the weight of someone who knew they'd dug a hole they couldn't climb out of. How long? I asked, the question choking me. 6 months, she whispered. It's been going on for 6 months. But I swear, I never meant for it to happen like this. I don't want to lose you, Greg. I don't want to lose our family. The words were like acid in my throat. 6 months. 6 months. I had been living in a house with this woman, thinking everything was fine, while my own brother, someone I trusted more than anyone, had been sneaking behind my back. It felt like the world had tilted on its axis, and I was falling faster than I could keep up. I need to see Mark, I said, my voice finally giving way to the anger I had been holding back. I need to hear it from him. I need him to explain himself. I turned to leave, but Emily reached out, grabbing my arm. Please, Greg. Please don't do this. Don't go to him. Don't make it worse. I yanked my arm away, the frustration and pain surging through me. He is the worst, Emily. You want me to forgive this? To forget about it? I walked toward the door, my mind a whirlwind of emotions, but the one thing that kept ringing in my head was that I couldn't let this go. I couldn't just forget. I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. The betrayal was too deep. As I drove to Mark's house, I thought about the years of trust, the countless memories, the moments of connection we'd shared. And I wondered how it could have all been a lie. How could I have missed it? How could he have been so willing to throw everything away for something so meaningless? I reached his place, the house looking exactly the same as it always had, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I knocked on the door, my hands trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. When Mark opened it, he looked at me with wide eyes, as if he had no idea what was coming. He probably didn't. He wasn't ready for this moment. Neither was I. Greg, I didn't think you'd find out, he started, but I didn't let him finish. Save it, Mark, I said, my voice low but filled with venom. I know everything, and I want to know why. He looked away, his face turning red. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I never meant to hurt you. I was confused. It just happened. I laughed, a bitter sound that didn't even resemble the man I used to be. It just happened? That's your excuse? 6 months, Mark. 6 months of lying to my face. And you think it just happened is going to cut it? Mark was silent. He didn't have an answer. I didn't expect one. I can't look at you the same way again, I said, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I had learned. You're dead to me. And just like that, I turned and walked away. The last door I had ever expected to close had slammed shut, and I had no idea how I was going to rebuild from here. But one thing was clear, I couldn't go back. The past was gone, and all that was left was to move forward, no matter how painful it was.